Dog Works Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/Teamaneke.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our 2020 Iditarod coverage here on Mushing Radio. You can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. And if you're here in the Mat-Su Valley, you can take a listen to us on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. Be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening now, and check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And be sure to follow our co-host. His name is Alex Stein, and on Twitter he is at Coldfoot Films. You could probably reach him anytime between now and sometime in the middle of the night for sure. Alex, how's it going today?
It's going great, Robert. You know, you mentioned last night that we are entering the part of the race where teams are starting to take their 24s, and we're seeing a lot of teams who are taking their 24s at McGrath. I think there are a couple at Nikolai and at Takotna and Ophir, and it's a little, we're in that time where the person who is the farthest down the trail is not necessarily what you could call really in the lead. So for the next day or two, until teams complete their 24s, which I expect most of them will in the next day or two, we're in that sort of tricky time where you have to figure that the teams who are far out ahead now are going to have to stop and sit somewhere for a full day, while the teams who have been sitting for 12 or 18 hours are going to be able to start going and then leapfrog the teams that are currently further along.
And there is already some developing stories in regard to those 24-hour rests. I know we're going to talk about Nick Pettit in just a second, but right before we aired, I was reading a story about Ryan Reddington, who had pulled into his checkpoint and he couldn't get his bunny boots unfrozen, and he was worried about frostbite, and he remembered that he had a pair of Neos and some new liners in his sled. I believe it was at Nikolai, and when he pulled in, he quickly realized that the sled that he sent there was parked under a roof, and it had dripped water all over his sled and frozen those brand new boots that he thought were going to be nice and warm, frozen to the bottom of his sled. So that's just one of the crazy things that happens at on the Iditarod Trail, and I'm sure we have many more stories about that, including the story about Nick Pettit that broke late last night. What was that, Alex?
So Nick Pettit was having kind of a problematic race, and he had a number of his dogs who were vomiting and who were not feeling well at all, and he pulled into, I believe it was Nikolai, and had decided that he was going to scratch. So he started calling some of his friends, and he called his business partner and sometime handler Katie and talked to her and said, "That's it, my race is over. I'm going to scratch." And she had posted about it on social media, and the Anchorage Daily News was doing a story about it. And so as of last night, it appeared that Nick was out of the race. But as we were talking last night with regard to Jim Lanier, it's not official until it's official. And, specifically, it's not official until the ITC sends out a press release and announces that someone had scratched. And what appears to have happened in this case is that Nick had a conversation with the race marshal, Mark Nordman, and it is required that in order to officially scratch, a musher has to actually talk to the race marshal. And he has a satellite phone, so he's generally reachable. And so Nick talked to Mark Nordman and was convinced, I believe, to at least sleep on the decision, get a little bit of rest. He had some dogs who had some frostbite issues, and he was able to get some stuff to treat the frostbite. And after a few hours and after getting something to eat, he decided that he was, in fact, going to continue and is now completing his 24, which should be, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly, it should be done probably within the next hour or so, and he'll be off on the trail again. So, late last night, we were thinking, oh, Nick Pettit is out of the race. And now Nick Pettit is back in the race.
Yeah, a quick turn of events for sure, but that's pretty common in not only Iditarod, but in other distance races. And we talked a little bit about that last night when we were talking about the dropped dogs situation, where a person will pull into a checkpoint and they'll say, I'm worried about this dog or that dog, and I'm not sure I want to drop them yet. I'm going to let them sleep on it. I'm going to see how they, kind of move and eat and that sort of thing, and then make a decision. And I guess that's very similar to what Nick was doing last night. And as you were talking, Alex, I remembered the story from several years ago about the guy that they were going to withdraw from the race because he was not competitive. And he had to get that call from the race marshal. And he did everything in his power to avoid getting that phone call. I even think he went down the trail a couple of checkpoints before he finally accepted the phone call and was officially withdrawn. Do you remember that story?
I do. I can't remember offhand who the racer was, but I do remember that story.
So that's just one of those checks and balances that they have in place along the Iditarod and all other races as well, because that race marshal is the one that's pretty much in charge. There are race judges and other officials at every checkpoint, but that person is the one that makes the final call, and that is Mark Nordman, the race marshal for Iditarod, and he's been doing this for many years. I don't know exactly how many. And speaking of Mark Nordman and making decisions, we got a little bit more information about John Schanelmeyer and his wife Zoya Denur, who had that last second change right there at the restart. And the story goes from a news story I read right before we went on air that Zoya has a condition called atrial fibrillation, and she has dealt with it for the last several years, and it acted up on her, and she had to go to the ER on Sunday morning. And, she knew it was a condition, and she knew she was probably going to be okay. So John had already gone to the restart, and they were calling back and forth, deciding on whether they should do this or not. And everybody made the decision that, they've been doing all the training and is in the best interest of the dogs for them to move forward. And he decided to jump on the runners, literally, and run in the race. And he said in the article that he had borrowed gear and mainly clothing from 6 different mushers and their handlers, but he doesn't even know who they are. He just grabbed what he could and put it on and took off. And it said in the article that while everybody else is happy to receive, nice new clothes and dry gear at checkpoints, he's coming to empty drop bags, and meaning that none of his gear is there, all of Zoya's gear, all of her clothing and gloves and all that. But he said, last thing I want to mention, he had said that this was not a race that he was particularly interested in running. He said he gave up the competitive spirit many years ago, and now he's comfortable just doing what he does. But he wanted to do this for his wife and for his dogs, and he's out there on the trail, and I think he will do very well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he will do very well as well. the thing to remember about John is that he is although he hasn't been racing very much lately, this is a guy who has the reputation of being extraordinarily tough. So I have no doubt that he will be able to just roll with the punches and do whatever it takes out on the trail. I wanted to mention before we go any further that we were talking about the whole leapfrogging and where people are taking their 24, and I just wanted to mention briefly that at the front of the race, Jesse Royer was leading and was the first team into Takatna, where she is taking her 24, and then after she stopped, and there were a couple of other people like Aaron Burmeister who were very close behind her. A group of mushers went past Takatna, specifically led by Paige Drobny and Michelle Phillips. And then they went to Ophir, and then they kept going past Ophir. And longtime fans might remember that in, I believe, 2011, Trent Herbst, who is a very, very good and competent musher, but not someone who ever really is a top 10 finisher, went all the way to the halfway point, because at the halfway point you win a prize. And so Paige Drobny and Michelle started going on past Ophir, and it looked like they were going to try to get all the way to Cripple, but it's 73 miles from Ophir to Cripple, so that's a long run, and most people would break that up into either 2 runs or sometimes even 3 runs. And so they stopped and were resting at the side of the trail, and then a group of other mushers, specifically Brent Sass, Lance Mackey, Mitch Seavey, and a couple of others, came up, and Brent and Lance passed them. And it looks like Brent is fixing to go all the way to Cripple without stopping from Ophir. So it looks like he's going to run that long 73 miles as one big run. He's currently, as I'm looking at the tracker, about 15 miles outside of Cripple. Lance is about 20 miles behind him, and then Michelle Phillips and Paige Drobny and Mitch are sort of all around a few miles in back of Lance. So it's a very exciting, race at the top, and it does look like Brent is going to be the first one to the halfway point. But again, he hasn't taken his 24, so presumably he will stop at Cripple and take his 24 there, or perhaps at the next checkpoint, although I believe that's also 50 or 60 or 70 miles up. So, while everyone is catching up to him, he will be sitting there waiting for his 24 to end.
Alex, you had talked about Trent Herbst and running that year all the way to the halfway point to receive that prize. And I know that's our next topic for tonight. And, that is sometimes a strategy, especially for the people that are not in contention to win the race. Those middle of the pack to back of the pack mushers, they'll really put the pedal to the metal in order to get some of these awards. And some of these awards are pretty hefty, and we're going to go run down the list in a second. But if you get to that halfway point and then get $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, I don't know exactly what it is, that is a substantial amount of money if you know that you're not in contention for one of those top spots, especially in recent times, since they dropped the prize money way down to what it didn't used to be. And I think right now it only pays down to the top 20 spots, so that those prizes could equal what you may get as a finisher in that middle tier of the race. So let's run down some of these awards and where they're offered and what they are, please.
So the first one is the First to McGrath Award. And on Twitter last night, which Jesse Royer won last night, and on Twitter, I described that as the Penn Airlines Spirit of Alaska Award. And that is just wrong, because not only has the name of the award changed, but apparently Penn Air doesn't even really exist anymore. So that award is the Alaska Air Transit Spirit of Iditarod Award. And I don't believe there is cash associated with it, but there is native art. Sometimes it's a mask or a painting or a sculpture. And I believe this year also handcrafted mittens. So that will be presented to or represented to Jesse at the banquet in Nome. And then the next one is the GCI Dorothy G. Page Halfway Award, which is for the first person to the checkpoint that's designated as the halfway point, which on the northern route is Cripple, although it's a little bit less than halfway, and on the southern route it's Iditarod. And there is a trophy that goes with that, and it's also $3,000 in gold nuggets. And then there's the Lakefront First Musher to the Yukon Award, which is awarded to the first person who gets to the first checkpoint on the Yukon. And that is a 5-course dinner, a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, and what they call an after dinner mint, which is $3,500 in $1 bills. And the cool thing about that award is that they fly up a chef from the lakefront who makes that 5-course dinner out there at the checkpoint using camp stoves. And then the musher who wins that also, I believe, gets the same 5-course meal at the lakefront in Anchorage anytime during the coming year. And then the next award is the Bristol Bay Native Corporation Fish First Award, which is the first team to CalTag. And that is $2,000 plus native art and a certificate for 25 pounds of fresh Bristol Bay salmon. And then there's the Ryanair Gold Coast Award, which is the first team to Uniloclete. And that is, again, some native art and $1,500 in gold nuggets. And finally, for the trail awards, there is the Northram Bank Achieve More Award, which is given to the first musher to White Mountain, and that's $2,500. And White Mountain is only 77 miles from Nome, so it is very, very common that the person who is the first to White Mountain will also go on to win the race.
And then we also have the Golden Harness Award for the lead dog or lead dogs that is almost always, I don't think it's ever been one different, of the winning musher. Then, of course, all of those awards that the winner receives, the new truck. And do you know the amount this year for the winner?
I don't think they've finalized it yet, but it's usually, I think the most it's been is 75,000, maybe a little bit more than that. And they said this year it'll be at least 50,000.
And that race or that award that you mentioned in White Mountain, is that a new award? I don't remember hearing about that in the past.
Yeah, I think it's relatively new. They might have been giving it out for like a year or two, but it's not something that they were giving out 10 years ago, certainly.
Well, that there, as we said, those awards are to be had by just about anyone. It typically isn't the musher that wins the race. I know you mentioned the one in White Mountain. That's pretty much a given, but there's been a lot of changes in that last 70 miles, haven't there?
There have been. I remember the year that Jeff King looked like he was poised to win his 5th race, and then he ran into that storm, and Allie was right behind him, and she stopped at safety, and Dallas came in and went right through and won.
Speaking of Allie, I heard briefly today that she was quoted as saying that her dogs are not running a competitive race this year. Did you read that article? And if you did, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I read that as well. And, it seemed like in the very early part of the race that was really true. And she was considerably farther back than I would expect her to be. She is currently um, she's currently about 20 miles behind Paige Drobny. So she's one of those people who is apparently going all the way up to cripple. And right now, and again, it's misleading because there are people taking their 24, but right now she is in seventh place. And it seems like whatever issues there were with her dogs, they are at least getting better.
So, Alex, we're about halfway if you think about time on the trail. In the last few years, people are doing it in about 9 days or so. And I have a question that we talked about briefly at the start of our coverage was about the new tracker system and the QPAWS website and all of that. I know that you're a insider and you have that package. So how has the technology fared so far this first half of the race?
Well, I actually hadn't intended to rant about this, but I am not happy with the technology for this year. Specifically, it used to be when you would look at the GPS screen, there would be a readout and it would have a list of all of the teams in order. And you would be able to see, I think, like 15 or 20 teams, like one line on each team. And now, when I look at this on the tracker, I can see two teams. So it has like a leaderboard, but there's only two teams at a time. And there's a lot more information than there used to be. But, if there's 58 teams, I'm just constantly scrolling down and it's harder to see where people are very quickly. So I'm not very happy with the changes to the tracker. And I was actually complaining about this on Twitter the other night, and people were showing me that on their computers they were seeing 5 or 6 teams. And apparently it might be a resolution issue with the monitor or something like that. But literally I can't see more than 2 teams on that little list. And that's very, very frustrating to me.
So is the pricing structure the same, that sort of thing? Or do you think, other than that tracker listing issue, are you getting your bang for your buck?
Yeah, it's I love having access to the tracker. I love being able to tell in between checkpoints exactly where people are. There's a lot more data in the last couple of years in terms of you can really track people's run rest. You can track their average speed when they're moving, their average speed overall, and you can do a replay and sort of go back in time and see where everyone is at a certain time, and all of that is really, really great, and I like that a lot. I actually this year have not had a chance to look at a lot of the video that the Insider has put up. I noticed that there's a lot of stuff there. I just have not had a chance to watch very much.
So before we jump into our musher profile of the evening, any other news or notes you want to mention?
Not really, no.
Okay, so who are we talking about tonight?
So tonight we are talking about Jessica Klika. She is 28. This is her second race. She was a rookie last year. She was born and raised in Bethel, Alaska. Grew up mushing with her younger siblings, and her family had a little dog team. And she had a childhood dog who was what she called a street mutt named Jed. When she was in 6th grade, Jeff King came to her school and did a school presentation. A lot of mushers will, in the off season, come to schools and talk about the mushing lifestyle and talk about what it's like to run these races and often bring dogs. And he did one of those, and that had a profound impact on her. And she since has become very good friends with Jeff King. And she started mushing small dog teams, and her dad had a sort of recreational group of dogs for mushing. And she would go out with her brothers and sisters while her dad was at work. And then when she was 12, she decided that she definitely wanted to become a serious musher and eventually run the Iditarod. And she ran her first race that year, which was run by the Cusco 300, and it was a 100-mile campout race for kids. And she ran that. When she was in high school, she ran and won the junior Iditarod. And when it came time to go to college, she chose to go to the University of Alaska at Fairbanks so that she could continue mushing during her non-school time, and also fly back to Bethel for big dog races. She worked summers doing glacier tours for Alaska Helamush, and was able to take her growing dog team with her on the glacier. After she graduated from UAF, she went to veterinary school at Washington State and got her doctor of veterinary medicine in 2016. And she's now working at the Big Lake Animal Hospital. And after the Iditarod last year, she did a couple of really great interviews with radio station KYUK. And one of the things that she said was that she had this picture in her mind of what the trail was going to look like and what it was going to be like. And she said that when she got to this part where there was very little snow on the ground, and then she got to another part where there was some snow, and she looked up and saw what she thought was a huge dog. And then she was convinced someone had lost a dog. And as she got closer and closer, she realized that it was a huge gray and white wolf. And the wolf was just standing there staring at her dog team. And as she got closer and closer, eventually the wolf ran. And she said it was her coolest moment ever to be with her dogs, running through those trees and seeing that wolf. She also has said that Bethel is one of the best places to grow up and to start running dogs to prepare for the Iditarod, because you get a lot of very, very rough conditions there, and you learn how to deal with extreme cold. And it's a very tough way of racing that they have out there. And once you do that, you are really well prepared for running the Iditarod. She also said that when she was preparing to run her first Iditarod, she called up Pete Kaiser, who also was from Bethel, and he was able to give her a lot of great advice. And then when she finished the race, Pete Kaiser, who of course won last year, came out and was waiting for her at the finish line. And there were all of her friends and relatives and people that she'd grown up with in Bethel who were there to greet her when she came in. And she said about her race last year that there were many humbling moments on the race, but if you're a capable dog driver in Bethel, then you definitely can have dreams and pursue them and go do a race like the Iditarod. And it's very, very cool that she is back again. And she is currently in 37th place, and I believe that she is taking her 24 as we speak at McGrath.
Alex, you talked about Bethel a lot in your profile, and for folks that don't listen to our show except during Iditarod, Bethel is a true hotbed of mushing in Alaska. They run a race called the Kuskokwim 300, and that's, I believe, the highest purse sled dog race anywhere in the country, and some of the who's who of the sport of mushing fly out there every January to take part in that. So if you're going to grow up anywhere in Alaska and learn how to drive dogs, Bethel is one of those places, isn't it?
It really is. And there's a very rich mushing tradition out there, and a lot of native mushers, and they tend to get overshadowed sometimes by a lot of Iditarod mushers, but there's such a rich tradition out there in Bethel.
Excellent. So, Alex, we have just a couple of minutes left, and we're going to do something real special here at the end of the show. But before we do that, anything else you want to mention before we go?
I just think that this is going to be a very interesting next 24 hours. And we're very lucky that we haven't had many scratches. There's just been Jim Lanier. And I think that is in large part due to the fact that that we have a lot of snow. And as we mentioned in the past few days, that's unusual for the recent past. And it feels much more like one of those older Iditarods from, from the 80s or 90s when there was just a ton of snow.
Yeah, and I'm always looking forward to seeing what the next 24 hours develops. As we said at the top of the show, a heck of a lot of mushers will have taken their 24s by then. A lot of folks will already be at that halfway point and headed toward the Yukon, and then they'll make that hard left turn into what we call the second third of the race, where they'll spend the next 4 or 5 days on the Yukon River as they work their way down to the last third, which is Unalakleet and along the coast.
Yeah, and I know we had talked tentatively about talking about Lance Mackey, but I think because of the time, let's maybe hold that and we'll talk about him tomorrow.
Yes, for sure. So, guys that are listening, we were sent over a special request to air a song that one of our loyal fans has produced about. It's about not a sled dog, but just about his family dog and the impact that that dog has in not only his life but in his family's life as well. So we're going to go ahead and play that here at the end of the show, and if you like it, send us a comment over on our social media pages and we'll pass them along to the producer. And otherwise, Alex, it's always a pleasure. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Okay,
thanks, Robert.
Thank you. We'll see you guys next time, and enjoy the song.
Hello, mushing fans. This is Michelle Forto, co-host of Dogworks Radio. I Got a Dog by Don McAvoy and the Great Whatever is this awesome song that we're about to play for you.
Well, every man should have a woman who loves him like his dog loves him. And every woman should have a man who loves her like a dog loves her. I got a dog, well, I've got a dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. She's loyal and proud, she's the queen of my young. She takes my chair, she's the house girl. She's glad I made it home, and not just to feed her. She's got limitless love, and I know I can please her. I've got a dog, well, I've got a dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. A committed friend, an unbreakable bond. She says I love you, she's licking her chops. She's the relative I chose, she matches my furniture. She's always happy, we can learn from her. Well, I've got a dog, well, I've got a dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. Well, I've got a friend right there, my dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. Oh, everyone should have someone who loves them like the dog loves them. Oh, everyone should have someone who loves them like the dog loves them. Oh, I've got a dog, well, I've got a dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. I'm always welcome, even when I'm late. I got her at a rescue, but it's me who's been saved. No barking, no growl, approval with a sniff. Loves the wag of a tail, but you better watch where you step. Oh, I've got a dog, oh, I've got a dog. Ain't nothing in this world quite like my dog. Oh, I've got a dog. Oh, I've got a dog. Oh, I've got a dog. Yeah, I've got a dog. Oh, I've got a dog. What a great friend. Oh, I've got a dog.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio. Did you know that Alaska Dogworks trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dogworks on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.